Welcome to the Microdosing for Healing podcast. I'm your host, Casey Garrett, and together we'll be discovering and learning from inspiring voices of healers, medicine keepers, and visionaries. Every episode, we'll explore the world of health, vibrant wellness, and natural medicine for a new era of human society. Welcome to today's episode. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to today's episode. So today I have a really special episode for you today. We are celebrating our anniversary here at the Microdosing for Healing podcast and 1 full year of the most incredible guests. I'm so grateful to all of you who agreed to be featured here on the podcast, and most of all to our incredible Microdosing for Healing community who inspired this podcast and have supported it from the start. So thank you all so much for being here. I wanted to celebrate today by doing a solo episode for all of you specifically, kind of a greatest hits of your fantastic questions that I get in my emails and my DMs and within our community on my intake calls. You know, a lot of you ask such great questions that don't get answered, out in the in ether. So I wanted to answer your questions. Lots of them are common questions. Many of them are absolutely hilarious. So we're going to have lots of fun today discussing them as well. But hopefully it'll be really highly practical and informative, whether you are just starting out, if you're thinking about getting into microdosing coaching, exploring programs, wherever you are in your journey. I hope this episode will be lots of fun and highly informative. So before we begin, first, a couple announcements. First, if you could be so kind as to leave a review wherever you're listening to this podcast, whether it's on Apple or Google or Spotify, it really helps spread the word to others so that the guests that I feature can be heard by more people. So if you can take a moment, just do a little star clicky click and leave a few sentences review, that would be super meaningful. The other thing is our doors are currently open for our summer immersion program. This is our flagship offering at Microdosing for Healing and will be our 25th cohort offering. It begins in June, the week of the summer solstice. And we do have some seats remaining in that. This is an incredibly intimate, it's my favorite program if you want to get started and go deep in your microdosing practice. It's the very best way to work with me very intimately in the course of a 6-week container with a small group cohort of people that you will really fall in love with and feel very at home with very quickly. So if you are interested in applying for that, you can find that on our website, microdosingforhealing.com, and just click on programs. So let's get started with your outstanding questions. So a common one that I get very frequently is, I have some old mushrooms given to me by my uncle's friend 3 years ago. Can I still use them? Generally not. I usually encourage people to work with mushrooms that have a living vibration to them. So if the source of the mushrooms is kind of a great mystery to you, you don't know how old they are, you don't know how they were held, you don't know who made them, give it a pass. When I have worked with people who do, who just go for it and work with that old mushroom of unspecific origin, usually they report their experience was weird, is the most frequently used word. So it's not that you won't have an experience, it's you won't necessarily have the most ideal kind of clean, energetic experience. So old mushrooms in your fridge, in your freezer, just generally take a pass on those. Next one is, how do I determine my dose if I'm microdosing for the first time? That's a great question. And one common misconception I hear all the time, and I see all over the place, is encouraging people to set their dose based on their body weight. I have found over and over again, your body weight and your physical size has very little to do with your dose, ultimately. So when you're starting out, I encourage you, if you're working with a guide, to talk with your guide about other factors aside from your physicality. Things that can contribute to this are your level of openness. Are you a pretty kind of flexible, bendy person by nature? Are you good at just going with the flow? Sometimes too much so? Are you highly sensitive? Are you very empathic? These things can inform and usually lead me to start someone on a lower dose. Sometimes people think they're more sensitive than they are. So I always encourage them, it's better to start low and go slow because you can always go up. I want you to have a really gentle, subtle, welcoming first few weeks in practice. So I'd always err on the side of starting lower. Another factor is, how much work have you done? How much therapeutic healing work, therapy contemplative practice have you done in the past can also inform your dose. I have found it's amazing. Some of the people I work with who are psychics or Reiki practitioners or have had meditation and contemplative practices for 40, 50, 60 years, they can work at a minute dose, a dose that you would not even think it would be possible to feel anything, yet they do. And they have significant shifts and openings just from minuscule amounts of mushrooms because they have done the work of opening. So fundamentally, your dose, there's so many layers to it. And I spend a lot of time on intake calls parsing out and listening between the lines people are saying to help arrive at their first dose. So as much as we would like to make it a cut and dried formula and put in a graph, it's not something you can really put in a graph, right? So sometimes I see, and it's very, very common, especially on websites or static sites or, printouts, they go by body weight. Even though it's not necessarily accurate, I think the human mind, our nature is to want to create certainty and uniformity, even if it doesn't exist, right? So take it with a grain of salt. If that's a good starting gauge for you and you don't have any other factors to go on, go for it. But just know that this is one of the aspects of practice that can be so well served by having support and a guide to really listen with you and presence with you and kind of piece together for you uniquely and your spirit where you're at, what dose will be the right starting dose for you. Next question. Where can I get mushrooms? Should I order on Instagram? Those of you who know me know how I feel about this. So the way I hold microdosing practice and mushroom practice is that we are working with spirit. We are working with nature. We're working with a sentient being that is so much older and so much wiser than we are. I don't hold this practice as if we're using a drug or a pharmaceutical prescription. So to me, the source of the medicine matters immensely. Not only how it was grown, where it was grown, but also who it was grown by, who holds it, who touches it, who imprints upon it. All of that is very, very important to me. And I have, since I began microdosing, I've always known the people that I work with, cultivate with, who work in the field, who make the medicines that I've worked with. And whenever I have experimented out of curiosity and where people give me samples, which happens, everybody has samples these days, on the rare occasions that I have tried to quote unquote sample, I got very ill. And it was an immediate spiritual no for me because it just wasn't the right resonance. It wasn't held. It was, it was clearly a commercial operation that was a money-making retail operation versus people I actually knew who were very, very close to the earth, who do this and only do this with love and just beautiful intention from start to finish. And so I really recommend knowing your source, knowing your cultivator, becoming your cultivator. That's why we teach people to grow your own within our course program. For those of you that's an aligned fit for. But I know a lot of you are going to say, it's not so easy. I live in so-and-so state. It's not like something I can go around talking about or looking for or cultivating. My recommendation to you is just step into this world. Meet and connect with people like me and other guides and journey guides in the spaces. This is really an interdependent connection, much like the mycelial forest, right? It's all connected. We're all connected. And so you just need to step into it and what you need will arrive to you. Who you need will arrive to you. So rather than like casting about on the internet, connect with people who are authentic and hold the medicine in a way that really resonates with you. And then doors will just open from there. Next question. I love this question. Can I journey alone? I've been looking around at retreats, but they're all so expensive and leaving my everyday life for days at a time is really difficult for me and my family situation. Can I journey alone? Is that allowed? I love this question so much. So the thing is, when you talk to most microdosing coaches and journey guides, we became who we are because we wish we would have had us, right? To help Sherpa us through the process, right? But the fact is, most of us started out alone because we didn't know anybody or we couldn't find anybody who was doing this work when we began it. So the answer is absolutely you can do this yourself. This is a practice that has been practiced for tens of thousands of years. And just that we've rediscovered it, in the last decade or two, we tend to want to make rules and silos and instructions and the way to do things. It's just our human way, right? But the fact is, yes, you can absolutely work with medicines. However, a couple important factors to consider. is how much work you have done with your soul already before stepping into medicine practice. If you have already done a lot of spiritual practice and yoga and meditation and contemplative practice and shadow work and parts work, these things all equip you to be able to navigate liminal realms and states. It's more once you begin microdosing, a lot of those people go, oh, this is really familiar. It's odd, but it's also familiar at the same time. So if you come in with that background, you might surprise yourself with the level of facility and grace that you experience once you start beginning practice with mushrooms. It'll feel like you've done it before because you've probably done it before. It's very common for that to happen. Another thing to consider is where you're at in your life and your level of resourcing. Like some people, especially those people who haven't done a lot of work in the past and are just kind of glamorized by the idea of getting so much therapy in, one day. And the glamorized side of that you read about of psychedelic journeys. It's really important to consider if you've done very little work in your lifetime, if you've done little prep work, the chances are better that you probably could have a pretty intense, quote unquote, challenging journey. And in that case, especially if you're brand new doing this for the first time, that's when I always recommend you lean on a wonderful, experienced, supportive journey guide. It will help you immensely in your process. So if you are the former, right, say you have a lot of experience, my best practice is if you want to learn to journey on your own is to start with microdosing. Hands down. Microdosing will, over time, show you all those shadows and crevices and nooks and crannies, and things will come up and threads will make themselves apparent that will later serve you in a journey. And you'll get into relationship with the medicines and a deep trust, a deep familiarity, a deep comfort, so that ultimately your journey is a continuation of the relationship, a deepening of the relationship that you have already set in place. And you're on a really, really strong, deep foundation with deep, authentic roots, right? That's the ideal way, I think, for most people to start with a relationship with microdosing in this gentle, subtle, but really profound way. Then what I see commonly happening in our community is instead of going straight to the mega high dose, they'll start working with step-up doses. And I personally work this way, and I've witnessed many people in our community, and my clients work this way, and it's great. As long as you are willing to be patient with yourself and know that your patience will pay off in the end with a depth and an ability to integrate all that you are gifted with in a much more profound way. So to make this clearer in actual practice, so say someone starts off at 50 milligrams of psilocybin microdosing, then they might go to 100 and 150. And then maybe they have, they take a break, and then a few months later, they try a 500 milligram dose, and they make their day spacious, solo, no pressures on either side of the day, and just see, how do they respond to gradual, gentle stepping up of dosing. What I have seen in a lot of people who microdose with me is ultimately they are able to journey and travel to different realms at a very, very low dose, like much lower than they anticipate because they laid this foundation. And so think of it this way, like mushrooms in nature, they remediate and they peel away. And so what I see in people is mushrooms do the same for us. And our psychic quality, our aura it's releasing density, it's releasing fear, it's releasing scarcity, all of these things that clog our spirits up and open us up. And as we open up and we don't have as much density, people actually need a very low dose to journey. So it's counterintuitive. Like oftentimes, another common question I get is, am I going to have to need to keep working at higher and higher and higher doses, similar to other medications and other medicines? No, it's actually the opposite. I've seen over and over again, the more clean your energy becomes, the lighter your frequency becomes, you actually will need a much lower dose over time, a much lower microdose, and a much lower ceremonial dose. It's pretty beautiful. So that's my best answer to that question. So yes, you can journey alone. I just really encourage you to do it with support, education, a strong sense of relationship with the medicine, and also to have a community around you of colleagues, a psychedelic society, integration circles, a microdosing buddy that you're practicing with, so that you make sure you're really grounded and you're really resourced. Then it's a yes. All right. Next question is, I am in my first few weeks of microdosing, and I'm feeling grouchy. I'm feeling tired. I'm feeling angry. I'm been really talkative. Like, how long, how long is this going to last? Is this just the way it is? So first of all, this is really, really, really common. And this is why the group experience can be so profound, is you will quickly see it's really common and it's really diverse and very, very unique to each person and very intentional to each person. So one thing to think of is, if you have big emotions or uncomfortable feelings coming up, is get super curious, because nature and the mushrooms are very wise. There is nothing that nature does that's not intentional. So if she's speaking to you in this way, kind of pay attention and get curious and go, if it's physical, if it's mental, if it's emotional, if it's spiritual, Spirit's always trying to talk to us. And I've seen over and over and over again, the mushrooms are so clever in the way they uniquely kind of sneak in indirectly, and they manage to communicate to us in a very unique way that is designed for our spirit to be able to receive that information. But we have to be willing to sit with that discomfort, sit with our feelings, sit with our emotions, which are a very, very, very important part of our humanity. Now, the mushroom practice is here, I believe now, to help move us into our intuitive self, our nimble self, our resourceful self, our instinctual self. And to do that requires having full facility of all of our emotions and our senses. And so if a lot of our senses have been dormant, sometimes our entire lives, it can be turning that on switch on can be a lot. It's like, holy smokes, the room is suddenly a little too bright. I need time to let my eyes adjust. Your first few weeks of practice might be a similar experience where you just need to let your eyes adjust to this new way of seeing, right? And so it's going to level out, it's going to lessen, but it's just kind of riding it out, seeing the bigger picture, creating the spaciousness in your life, giving yourself a break, not being too hard on yourself. I work with a lot of high achieving and perfectionistic people. They're so hard on themselves, and they want all of this resolved immediately, or they think they need to do more work to resolve it. It's just let nature work on you, let spirit work for you is what's happening. It's just bringing up these old densities and emotions to clear them. And over and over again, it's the willingness to sit with these big emotions, face them, move through them. That on the other side of that is when the big gifts drop in, the gifts of intuition and creativity and telepathy, and your reflexes are better, and your awareness is strong, and your ability to read a room. Like, it just goes on and on and on and on, what we're capable of. And as we evolve as humans, you start to get glimpses of where we're going and what we are truly capable of. And it far exceeds where we are at right now. So how long you have to deal with this is going to be very, very unique to each person. Typically, I will say, though, it's never more than a few weeks for the vast majority of people. And think about it this way. Nature is always seeking a balance, right? In the natural world. And we are evolving into all of the factors to contribute to our highest and best chance of survival, right? From an evolutionary perspective. So seeing our healing through that lens, again, everything nature does is very intentional. So sometimes if something has been so out of whack for so many years, sometimes nature needs to overcorrect to bring us back into balance. So for example, if you suddenly find yourself, I've had many, many clients go, I just talking. Everybody around me is like, well, you just start talking so much more. A lot of times that's exactly the people who for decades, like, never had a voice. They never spoke up. They were conditioned as children to be the quiet one, be the good girl, don't have an opinion, don't rock the boat. And all of a sudden it's those people who suddenly find their voice, and they're speaking up, and they're standing up for themselves, and they're finding their voice again after being. So this tends to, again, level out after a few weeks of practice, but it's just that initial, balancing act. So look at if you're experiencing big emotions or big feelings, know that it's probably because you haven't felt enough of that thing to put yourself into balance. So I see this over and over again. A couple great examples. People experience fatigue and exhaustion. They're the people who just hustle. They often take pride in how busy they are. Like, I'm in back-to-back meetings for 13 hours a day. And it's like they start microdosing, and there's a message just knocks them out. And they're like, what happened? It's typically really frustrating for them, but it's because their adrenals are so depleted, their spirit is exhausted, and their body wants them to heal. And if the medicine needs to knock you out to get you to slow down, so be it. And so that's an extreme example where nature will overcorrect to get you to slow down, right? Another one I see commonly is people get irritated and angry and cranky, and they're like, oh, I did this to feel better and I'm just grouchy. What's going on? Typically, again, like think about it, it's people who tend to be really uncomfortable being angry. Being angry is a really uncomfortable emotion. And especially people who are in wellness and spiritual communities, we can all suffer from bypassing, and anger is a very, very common one where we're above being angry. We've worked through all of our anger, right? And it's like those are the people who tend to really, really feel their anger for the first time. And it's really uncomfortable. And oftentimes they'll blame the mushrooms. Like, I don't think this is working for me. I don't think this is working for me. And actually, it's working really well for you. It might be working too well for you. And again, anger is a really healthy emotion. It's our fire, it's our passion. And if we can harness that energy and the momentum and express it healthfully out into the world, that's a beautiful thing. But a lot of times people who have this crankiness and irritation, and it too clears, it's because we have been suppressing our inner fire, or we have been not holding boundaries tightly enough, or we had boundaries violated when we were too young to hold a boundary, right? So all of these emotions are not the mushrooms failing you at all. It's the mushrooms doing their best to communicate to you in the way that they know how. And it's our job as humans to attune ourselves to the communication of spirit and nature, and not expect nature to meet us in our human way or our human expectation of feeling good all the time, right? Because that's not living a fully expressed life. All right, next question. Can moon cycles, eclipses, and so forth affect our microdosing practice? 100%. Absolutely. So I'm very grateful. I'm surrounded by beautiful astrologers and clairvoyants and psychics. And therefore I kind of hear from them frequently about what's going on in the larger cosmos. So I have seen that over and over and over and over again, is to at least be somewhat aware of that when you're starting practice. A lot of times I do that for my clients and they don't even know I'm doing it, right? But I do time, like when my groups start, it's very intentional around, I want to harness the natural energies that are happening for and with us to help support our practices. That said, one thing it's important to consider is when we have like really powerful transits happening or eclipses happening, full moons happening, it can amplify things even more. So recently we just went through a really, really high-powered eclipse portal in 2024. And I witnessed this in people, and it was really, really interesting during kind of the heart of the portal itself between the eclipses. I had so many clients who I've been working with for months and sometimes for years suddenly say, I'm finding that I need like teeny tiny doses, or I went from practicing at 4 or 5 days a week of microdosing to just 1 or 2. What's going on? And that was beautiful, beautiful feedback, and showed me they're so in touch with their intuition and their own body to know that's exactly what they needed, because the effects of the medicine were being amplified because of the intensity of the transits and portals we're moving through. So I love this question. I'd say yes. Can my menstrual period and cycle affect practice? Absolutely. Yes, it can. Yes, it can. So one beautiful thing that I have witnessed is watching women shift their perspective around their luteal phase, which is kind of the week or two leading up before you get your period, is often a time we just don't want to deal. We're just like, oh, I don't want to deal, right? A lot of women get migraines and headaches and just want to be inward, cranky, irritable, crampy. We have physical effects. We have emotional effects. And it's a much maligned time in a women's cycle because it's so counter to the expectation of a homogenous culture where we work Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, every week, and we get up and we do the same thing over and over and over again. That's not how a woman's cycle works. We are rhythm, we are tide, we are cyclical. And so we can work with our microdosing practice more along the lines of our cycle and know when we're going to be more outward and outgoing and action-oriented, in times in our cycle when we're going to be more inward and contemplative and sensitive. And with mushroom practice, this maligned period of a woman's cycle is actually such a gift to do this inner work, because the veil is thinner. Our connection to spirit is closer. We have this draw to go inward and heightened sensitivity at this time, that it can be a really, really powerful time to do deep inner work and to do the soul work. So yes, I think over time, many women ultimately wind up doing intuitive dosing and find that different doses work differently for different phases of their cycle. So the longer you practice with microdosing and connect to the medicine will help you determine when you need more and when you need less. So yes, that is a full yes as well. How do I adjust my dose over time? So this is very much related to. So typically in our programs, I love to work in a 6-week format. 6 weeks is just long enough, just barely long enough to open the door, right? A lot can happen in a very short amount of time. So 6 weeks is substantial enough to notice, for most people, shifts and effects, for sure. But it's also not so long as to, to prolong a practice that is not meant to be a chronic daily thing. I love the idea of a structured protocol and doing things in a framework, mostly because I love the idea of introducing a different, more empowered way of healing, where we're not doing this with the intention of becoming reliant on mushrooms as just another prescription. We are doing this thing for a set period of time. We are very aware, and we are assessing how we're doing after that 30 days or 6 weeks or 90 days, whatever you choose to approach it. So as I mentioned before, a lot of people find over time, not only do they not develop tolerance, they actually need much less medicine over time. Many people notice that during their breaks from microdosing practice, they continue to feel shifts and integrations, and sometimes more happens during their break time than their actual physical dosing. So again, I love to frame microdosing practice as a relationship with the medicine, that it's not like, imagine you're in a relationship with a person that you're deeply soul connected to. You cannot see that person for months or years sometimes, but then when you see them, it's like, oh, there you are, right? And you were always there. That's the relationship with the medicine ultimately that you will develop. And sometimes it'll take just days. Other people, it'll take weeks. Other people, it'll take months. But it happens for almost everyone who is willing to work with the medicine and be open enough to move through these periods of unknown and discomfort and, I don't know what's going on right now, and move through those times. And ultimately, you'll get to a point where you feel so connected to the medicine will guide and lead you. Okay, it's time to restart again. It's time to reconnect again. And it becomes less a mental construct of, this is, my dose 3 months from now. And it's more when the medicine comes to you. It calls to you intuitively. It comes to you in dreams and in symbols, in interactions and serendipities. And you'll know when to begin again. All right. Next question is, oh, great. When should I take a break? And how long should that break be? So at the end of each 6-week cycle in our program, this is a really, really, really popular question. And a lot of people have a lot of anxiety around it and apprehension around it. It's very, very common, especially if you're in a group program. And ours tends to be very intimate, and our cohorts tend to be really connected and close. So it's the apprehension around ending your microdosing practice, taking a break, but it's also apprehension around losing the intimacy and connection to your group, your guide, the friends that you've made, and the lifestyle shifts and rituals that you have initiated in your life. So it can be very, very helpful. And I have learned this by working through many, many group practices now. I find it really, really helpful to reassure people throughout the entire process is you have it all. You're not losing anything. Like, you're not losing your connection with the medicine by stopping. Our courses and programs all dovetail one into the other, so that you always have an anchor and a base with us that's familiar and connected. You still have me, you still have the group, you still have your cohort in our global community. So that can really, really help people, and the apprehension and anxiety people feel about losing the magic that they just experienced. So in terms of the physical practice itself, it's so unique to each person when to take a break. In a nutshell, the way I've seen it play out is this. Some people have an immediate results happen and gifts fall in with microdosing practice. And a lot can happen in 6 weeks. It's pretty amazing. And enough shifts and enough happens, and there's enough to integrate going on that at the end of 6 weeks, they're kind of like, I'm good, right? I'm good. I'm ready to integrate for a while now. So if that's you, there you have it. Like that's a good amount of time. Some people will take off a couple weeks. Some people will take off a month. We talk about it in the group and reflect around it and help you make a decision. The second way I've seen this play out is people have a really, really slow, steady experience with the medicine, and not a lot is happening that's obvious. It tends to be like subterranean in a way, where I'm very energetically sensitive to people. So I can see it in people week to week in our calls. But oftentimes people are like listening to other people who have these huge experiences, very outward experiences. And they're like, I don't know if anything's going on, but you can see it going on for them. What's happening, I think, is nature's wisdom in knowing the pace that people need, the pace that someone's spirit needs to advance in this work. And so it's not pushing you too fast or too hard. And a lot of the people who have this experience, it's really just working with them and their expectations and having patience and compassion with themselves. It tends to be people are really hard on themselves, get impatient and think they're doing something wrong or think they need to do something more. Or they're the people who are like, maybe I need to up my dose. It's like, no, you don't need to up your dose. Your dose is fine. And those people at the end of the 6 weeks, it's not the time to necessarily take a break. It might be time to do some other different lifestyle practices, incorporate different rituals, and maybe change the dose. Maybe if they were dosing in the morning, they might try dosing at night. They might try splitting their dose into two and dosing in the morning and half in the morning and half in the afternoon. So there's little changes you can make like that. But I think if people who are kind of rocking it steady at 6 weeks, but haven't had a whole lot of movement that's obvious, that's not necessarily the time to take a break for them. Then lastly, what I have seen, and I was in this camp, was people have big emotions come up to clear. Oftentimes it's fatigue. It can be grief. It can be irritation and anger. I myself had a lot of grief and density to clear around grief. And I remember it taking me by surprise because I was like, I've done a lot of grief work. I was like, there's more. But what's interesting was my being needed to clear those big emotions. And I see this in clients all the time where the medicine is going to work, doing its thing on your spirit, and it's clearing this density out. And people are having a lot of tears, a lot of emotion, crankiness, fatigue. And all of that is starting to clear, and that density falls away. And it's like the light is starting to crack through at like week 4, 5, 6. And all the gifts are starting to shower in. And you start to see and feel like there's something awesome coming. And there is. And that is not the time to take a break. Absolutely not. So it's kind of like if you are just getting up on your surfboard and you are just timing that wave perfectly and you are on the wave, you're not going to jump off your board in the middle of that wave, right? And so again, this is when it's so important to know yourself, have a certain level of self-awareness, have a guide, have a community, have a group to reflect to you like you're really in flow right now. Like there's things moving. There's big energy moving. I mean, there's big things happening. This is not the time. Let's ride this wave in and then we'll take a break. So again, so many of the answers to your questions are so unique and nuanced and based on your specific soul. And that's why having the support is so, so useful, right? Because we don't always see ourselves as clearly as others see us. All right, next question. Where is the best place to learn if I'm considering getting into the field? Can I message you on Facebook? On behalf of most journey guides and coaches in this field, don't DM us. Some of you don't mind, but for your sake and safety's sake, social media platforms, most of us are on there because we hold a deep reverence for this work. And that's what we've got right now, right? So a lot of us are like reluctantly visible on those platforms. I tend to love those platforms because I view them as forms of art and expression. I think it's super fun. It's so fun to share what's actually happening with people for me. So I love social media, but in terms of communication and safety and feeling protected, no, it's not necessarily the best platform for that. So for your own safety and your own sake, the best place to reach out and inquire this work is through the channels that we usually lay out on our websites. A lot of times to do this work and have a public presence and website, especially the medicine makers and the cultivators, they have so much going on behind the scenes that they needed to put in place to protect you and protect them. They're doing this work because they so believe in the healing power and potential of this work that they've had to jump through lots and lots and lots of hoops and create lots of layers of protection for you. So all of their instructions tend to be on the website, and just trust that if it seems like laborious that you have to do this and you have to jump through this hoop and best hoop, it's because it's designed to protect the work above all. And so yeah, just if people have listed like the best way to reach out to me is this way, or the best way to book a call is this way for information, usually people will have that laid out. But I think approaching this work with softness versus aggression and entitlement also goes a long, long way. People's experience of mushrooms are all different, but my experience of spirit is mushrooms respond really, really well to humility and the human quality of humility. And they are humility kind of personified in the natural world. It's their role. They're quiet, but their work is profound. And so they see that and reflect that when they see that in people too. So if you approach this work and this practice with humility and reverence, you'll find exactly what you mean. If you want to get into this work, which is so exciting, there's tons and tons and tons of interest in this work right now. My best recommendation is connect with people doing the work, because we all hold the work so uniquely based on our background, our spirit. My spirit guide is very, very close with me and a remarkably important part of my work and how I hold space and how I lead my groups. Sometimes I feel like I'm apprenticing her in this work, right? It's the way it goes, honestly. And so everybody has their own mentors and teachers and approaches to, and we're all microdosing coaches, but yet we're so different. So I encourage you to kind of bop around, because you'll click on people that are like, that's my guy, or that she's holding the medicine in a way that really speaks to my spirit. One of my inspirations for this podcast was to bring diverse voices who weren't necessarily being platformed. It takes a certain type of person to write the books and get on the stages and go after the opportunities. A lot of the people who are doing this work and have been doing this work underground for many, many years are not the ones that are most visible in the space. And so creating this podcast, I really wanted it to be an opportunity to bring forth those people so you could see them and learn from them and hear their visions and connect with them if that feels like an aligned fit for you. This practice and learning this practice is so experiential. I have studied many, many, many modalities and skills of all kinds in the healing arts over the last 3 decades. This work, more than any other, is so experiential and so guided by spirit, for me at least, to watch it evolve and how to hold it and how to do it. And I still, after this point, 800 people that I've witnessed and held, I still feel like I'm just learning, right? And I'll continue to learn for the rest of my life, hopefully. So when you are looking for who to learn from, who's my teacher, who's my mentor, who's my guide, who's my collaborator, I think lean in and don't just look for somebody on a directory. Don't look for the most obvious visible person. Kind of look around and feel around. And I know I am a person, I'll work with someone, and I oftentimes, if someone is not an aligned fit for me, I know enough other guides who do what I do around the world who are going to be the exact perfect fit for you, right? And so I am always happy, and many, many of my colleagues feel the same way, is we're all interdependent. And I think we all excel based on our unique backgrounds, who we love to work with and who we're best aligned to work with. So that's my best advice. If you're kind of just dipping your toes in and you're kind of being summoned to this work and you can't exactly say why, is just step into it. Start microdosing, start a practice, get into a community, get into a program, join our immersion, join our community, and let things unfold from there. You'll meet exactly who you are meant to meet. Do I offer high dose work, retreats, or ceremonies? No, I don't. And here's why. One, I've been told by my spirit guide, I'm here to do very specific work, and it is with microdosing. It's with working with medicines here on the earth realm, although it's a lot less interesting than the spiritual realms. I'll give you that. It's my role. It's what I'm here to do. I love working with beginners. I love working with people who are preparing for a high dose ceremony, who are integrating a high dose ceremony. But I am here to bring spirit and the natural world into people's real everyday earthly muggle world lives, into their relationships, into their dharma, into their career. That's what I'm here to do. And it's what I love to do. So that said, I maintain a huge diverse network of guides and ceremony guides and retreat guides all over the world that we have beautiful collaborations with. When people in our community are ready to do those things, we can have vetted trusted people we love who are deeply experienced and aligned to refer them to. So when you work with us, my hope is that between the podcast and our programs and our community, we kind of create this safe home and ecosystem that you can kind of come in and come out. And sometimes you'll be really active and participatory. And sometimes you'll step away and you'll go work with a guide and you'll go on a retreat. But you can always come back. You can always come back in and out and home. But again, working with people who are aligned with people is the best way I have found versus just kind of like going by a directory or guide, right? All right. What if I want to start microdosing and I don't feel like I can tell my spouse? This is a tough one, and I've gotten this one more than once. And we talk about it is the short answer. So I love to talk with people about like what's actually going on, like what's behind that question. And it tends to be two things I have found. One is my spouse has so much conditioning and stigma and fear, and they're confusing mushrooms with fentanyl. And I just don't want to deal, I just don't want to have to explain it to them because they're not going to take it upon themselves to learn. Right. And so that's very, very real because as we know here in 2024 Earth, everybody is in their own reality, right? And on very different channels. And so it can be difficult to navigate. And so each case is unique. I really like to talk with people about like what's going on, what's the status of your relationship, because you will change. Healing, typically you will change and you will get stronger and more resilient and more yourself and true to yourself. And as with all growth, it can be deeply uncomfortable to people who aren't interested in growing. So this question, I think, is really valuable. If you and your spouse are on completely different pages around you microdosing, this to me is a really great portal to have a deeper conversation about what is about to happen for you. What are your own personal hopes and intentions, and how does your relationship play into that? On a more subtle level, sometimes I get the question like, my spouse is supportive. They're just kind of different. They're like, honey, I want you to be happy. I want you to heal. I support you, but I'm just not interested in this for myself. And I'm just really not interested in hearing about it. And so sometimes in this circumstance, it's so nice to have a community and a group and a guide who are as equally as passionate as you are about what's about to happen for you. And you have like camaraderie and support in the experience, right? Which is so fun. So I think that's fair if your spouse isn't necessarily going to be by your side, like cheering you on or very interested in what you're doing. That can be disappointing, but it can also be really affirming to know that there's kindred spirits like literally all over the world who are exactly where you are. So it's not a detriment. My best advice when you have support or spouses or family members that they're not as supportive as you wish they would be is to hold your practice in such a sacred, reverential way and protect it and hold it as special to yourself. It's so, especially people who have really powerful dynamic experiences with microdosing or they do journeys and they just want to share. They just want to share. And that's totally understandable. But it can be really, really heartbreaking to have this amazing, beautiful experience. And then you share it with a family member who just kind of like throws a wet towel all over it. And it's so, it hurts your heart and it's really disappointing. And so again, temper your enthusiasm and these great changes taking place and share it with your community, share it with your integration circle, share it with other people who are in the practice with you, just to protect your relationship, the sacredness of the relationship and what you're experiencing. Next question. What if I have a family history of bipolar disorder, seizures, suicide, schizophrenia? Can I microdose? Everything that I read online, these are all contraindications and tell me I can't work with mushrooms. Love this question. If I listened to this instruction, I would be the last person on earth to work with mushrooms because I literally have every single one of those conditions myself or with a direct, immediate family member. All of them. And so it floors me to think if I would not have attempted microdosing because of those factors, how much I can't even imagine my life at this point without mushrooms and what mushrooms have given me in this lifetime. So yes, I will say it is possible to explore microdosing if you have those things in your family. And secondly, I would say it's really important to have support based on exactly where you're at. Like if you have extreme personal mental health issues, it's really, really important you have your provider, your psychiatrist, your therapist, whoever is holding space for you knows you really, really well in the process, who can work with you on a one-on-one basis. If you are someone who is generally healthy and well, and you have family members who have these things, this is why I love microdosing so much, because I was definitely in this camp. As I said, I had all of those things in myself. I had a grand mal seizure disorder. I would definitely not have been accepted in any high dose clinical study. And as a kid, I was never drawn to recreational psychedelic use because I was terrified. Like, my brain was already kind of doing its own thing on its own. Like, I was not going to push my luck and do high dose psychedelics and further. I really, really wanted to maintain control, was important to my spirit and soul, and still is. So microdosing, when I came across microdosing, I was like, yes, this feels really aligned, because I can still stay in the earth realm. I can accrue some of the benefits that I'm reading about and hearing about, but I will not destabilize myself to the point of my own resourcing and my own capacity. So if you have these things in your family, if you have these things affecting you personally, I think assess on a case by case, assess your level of emotional stability in this moment, assess your level of support and resourcing you have in your life at this moment, assess your spaciousness in your life. How much time do you have in your life to focus on your own healing? But just know, despite this conventional wisdom and narrative that is everywhere, trust that you can receive the benefits of this healing in a way that works for you over time, that is safe and effective. So talk about it, talk about it with your practitioner, and talk about it with people in communities who, like me, have experienced all of those things and still extremely successfully developed the microdosing practice. I am so busy. I don't know if I have time to do a program. I'm so busy, but I still curious about the benefits of microdosing. This is so common. So I work with a lot of executives and CEOs and people who are so busy they can't do a group program. Lots of them would love to. They're always asking me about it, but they just can't because of the constraints of their travel schedule and demands on their time. And so, yes, you absolutely can microdose. You don't have to have 3 months to set aside, to go live in an ashram. And you don't even need to set aside time like you would a psychedelic retreat. One of the beauties of microdosing is it is made to integrate into your daily life. That's the whole point, is not needing to leave your life to make it better, but to make your existing life more full, more expansive, and more vital, so you don't want to leave your everyday life. Like, ultimately, the goal is to create a whole new set point for yourself where you just wake up and you are a sense of fulfillment and harmony and enoughness and abundance is just kind of your new default, right? It takes something to knock you out of that versus needing something from the external world to fulfill a need and a lack in you. That's ultimately where you want to get to with microdosing practice. So if you are busy, absolutely. So personally, I only do one-to-one work very, very selectively. Like I said, I work with a lot of celebrities. I work with a lot of CEOs and executives who can't do the group work either because they're too visible or their schedule is absolutely nuts. And so we'll do our calls at like 6 a.m. and, on weekends sometimes. So just find the right guide for you. Some of my colleagues, that's all they do is one-to-one work. So just know there's lots and lots of options. You don't have to do a program. You don't have to do, something that's evolved. You don't have to take a course in microdosing to start to microdose, for sure. I am on a slew of medications. Can I microdose? Sometimes, often, yes. So that's my answer. So this is super, super, super common. So I always, in my application, my intakes with folks, I love to ask them about their medications. One, because it's relevant. But two, even though I am not a pharmacist and a doctor, prescriber, and I can't really offer consultation on it, I love to converse about it because I love to learn how knowledgeable people are about the medications that they're currently taking, sometimes for decades. I love to learn a little bit more about their relationship to those medications, right? It's very, very telling beyond the obvious to make those inquiries. And so beyond that, we work beside some wonderful, wonderful pharmacists and nurses and doctors and scientists in the space who do have deep, substantial expertise in these areas. So just know they're out there. There are some amazing professionals who specialize in psychedelic work and are safe, vetted sources for you to go to confidentially and bring all your medications, bring all your dosages and what you're on, and have them offer some guidance of how you can approach working with earth medicines simultaneously to current medications and or medications that you might be tapering off of. But know that it's possible. I have several wonderful podcast episodes about this. Dr. Ben Malcolm is featured in one. Dr. Emily Kolpa is featured in one. Jennifer Zuckerman is featured in one. All of them do a lot of work with clients who are wishing to work with psychedelics and microdosing, as well as be simultaneously on or tapering off of pharmaceutical drugs. So those are some great episodes to check out. My journey guide says she can support me in microdosing, but what that so far has amounted to her just giving me microdoses. So I get a lot of these, especially lately, where I see professionals in the space, and everybody is, first of all, super well-intentioned, right? But the field is growing so fast, and the public is just racing for information and connection and knowledge and experience, that it's really easy to try, for those of us in the field, to try to be like everything to everyone. And I know I get a lot of inquiries where people expect me to answer like everything under the sun about psychedelics, and they're asking about LSD, and they're asking me about 5-MeO. Like, fortunately, I have colleagues who are deeply experienced in all of these different medicines. But I think the assumption is that because we're a coach or a guide in the space, like, we're going to be able to do all the things. And lots of us are well-intentioned, and we're trying to serve our clients when it's kind of outside of our wheelhouse necessarily. So when I hear this, a lot of times people are coming to me after the fact because microdosing is a distinct thing. I mean, of course, I'm biased because I devote myself to this work. And I hold it as unique. And I think it deserves its own container and its own level of expertise. Working with microdosing is very different than working in ceremonial spaces. It's very different working on the earth realm than it is in the spiritual realm, right? So I think ultimately, ideally, yes, if you have a really close, trusted relationship with your guide who can do all the things and can take you from microdosing through ceremony and back again, and has deep experience and fluidity doing all the things, then by all means. But what I receive a lot of inquiries about is someone who has done a journey, is doing a journey, and the journey is the focus, and the microdosing is just kind of like, here's your mushrooms. And there's not a lot else to it in terms of support and guidance and education. So just know that there's a lot to both things, and you might be best served by working with someone who has a specialty and devotion to what it is that you're working on, and let yourself kind of evolve in your practice in that way. All right. My final question, yes, is I microdosed for some time, and I just had my first journey, and I can't wait to do another one. So in my own community, I have seen again and again when participants lay a foundation with microdosing and prepare for their journey, it is extraordinary, as it can be. And after you touch into that realm, you attain that level of guidance and insight and perspective and expansion. It can be really, really tough to come back to the earth realm, right? And it's very, very common for people to just kind of want to escape. I just want to go back. I just want to go back to my journey. People say oftentimes, like, I just want to go back to my, how I felt and where I was in that ceremony. And so the question I get is like, well, how soon is too soon? How do I know when it's time to do a journey versus when should I stay microdosing versus when should I stop? And again, as I recommend in almost all cases, like, a lot of it is so unique and individual. But like, to use myself as an example, there was a moment where I had plans, I believe it was a holiday, and my plans fell through out of my control. And I thought I had handled it pretty well, but I was feeling a bit lonely, and I was feeling down and a little bit abandoned. And so I was like, oh, perfect. I should do a journey. I should do a journey today. And as soon as I crossed over into the mystical realm, my guide was there. She's always there to greet me on the other side. And she was hilarious. It was hilarious in that, like, she's usually there, in a somewhat profound way. And in this particular journey, it was like a dimly lit kitchen, and she was off in the shadows, and she was like stirring something on the stove, and she barely acknowledged me coming into the room. And I just could feel her acknowledge my presence finally. And then, without even looking at me, she said, "You were just here. What do you want?" And I thought, oh, gotcha. She has my number right away, right? And so what she was saying to me was, you know full well that you have been given so much already. and you're coming back here because you are feeling lonely, or you're coming back here because you're feeling bored, or you're coming back here, And so she was saying to me in her own funny, direct way, as she does, she's like, don't expect me to entertain you. You need to be more interesting in your life. This is why you're here. And she's like, what are you doing here? And I sheepishly said, well, I had a few more questions. And she begrudgingly said, okay, well, come on. And she was completely benevolent, as she is, and patient with me, and always patient with my humanness, and waits for me to catch up to her. and then acquiesced and had a beautiful experience where I was able to ask everything that I wanted to ask. But it was just such a hilarious opening to that journey. And I share this with a lot of people who ask that question, because it's so important to be honest with yourself and real with yourself and go, why am I drawn to doing this? Am I trying to escape dealing with my life? Am I trying to escape doing the work in my life? Am I escaping having difficult conversations? And I just want spirit to come over and be the one who absolves all of this for me. A strong message I get from my guide and the spiritual realm is, one, they are rooting for us, and two, they want us to grow up. It is time for humankind to grow up. And so all of the behaviors that we have when we try to project, this parent projection onto our ceremony, the mushrooms, our spirit guides, they're not having any of that. They want us to grow up and evolve. And so having deepening and evolving relationships with the medicine, multiple journeys in the course of a lifetime, will be common for many, many of you. Others of you will have one, and it will be so profound. That's all you need in one lifetime. There's no right or wrong. And I definitely don't believe there's credence to you have to have 25 journeys before you're qualified. The amount of journeys has nothing to do with the level of soul advancement and your spirit in this lifetime has to do. I've seen plenty of people who are more spiritually advanced than most who have never done a journey, but have had a 30-year contemplative practice, right? And then I've met people who've done hundreds and hundreds of medicine ceremonies who are still young souls, right? So listen to yourself, be honest with yourself about where you are and what's motivating you, and really use that as your judgment. Be sure that your spirit is actually calling you to the medicine, and it's not your mind or it's not your uncomfortable emotions, right? Let yourself be led by spirit in all things, and that will always keep you true. So thank you all so much for being here. I love receiving your questions. I hope I covered lots of questions that you might have on top of your mind if you're new and curious to this field, but so grateful for all of you. I'm really grateful for your support and friendship over the last year of our podcast. So thank you. Please do leave a review if you have a chance, and I will look forward to seeing you back here in just a couple weeks. All right. Have a great day. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Microdosing for Healing podcast. Are you ready to take the next step? Please visit us at microdosingforhealing.com to access our free Microdosing 101 workshop. In it, you'll learn more about our diverse community, our supportive group programs, and discover if earth medicine practice might be right for you. See you in the next episode.